In an earlier video, I asked if evil was winning, and in this true story, I'll show you how it very nearly did. It's one of the most chilling, detailed, and well-documented exorcisms ever recorded. The real case that inspired the movie The Exorcist. Now, you may think you know the story because you watched the movie, but stay with me to the end and I'll go over the things that Hollywood invented and why the real case matters to us even more today. In 1949, a 13-year-old boy living in Maryland as an only child began experiencing very bizarre events. He was given the pseudonym Roland Doe to protect his identity. I'll call him Roland in this video. By most reports, Roland was a quiet, shy, and well-behaved boy. What really shaped his life before this ordeal was his relationship with his Aunt Harriet. Now, she had a fascination with spiritualism, and she was the one who introduced him to the Ouija board. When Harriet suddenly died, Roland grieved her deeply. Missing her, he tried to reach out to her using the Ouija board, and that's when strange things really began. Scratching in the walls, furniture sliding across the floor, objects flying through the air. At first, the family just dismissed this as their imagination, or perhaps their grief, or maybe an animal in the wall. But even neighbors would later say that they confirmed having seen things when they were at the house as well. So far, you might say this is just imagination or grief, or maybe even a prank. But what happened next makes it impossible to dismiss. Strange activities seemed to follow Roland wherever he would go. Things such as his school desk, moving around, banging into other desks and disrupting the class. And weird things happened when he was visiting at friends' houses too. For example, one time his family and their friends were chatting. Robbie's rocking chair began to spin around like a top and lifted him off the ground with his legs hanging in the air as if propelled by some unknown force. But it didn't stop with furniture or scratching in the walls. Before long, the strange activity had started to center on Roland himself. And that's when things went from disturbing to terrifying. His bed would shake violently, like it was caught in an earthquake. Red marks appeared on his body. And Roland's behavior shifted too. When a Bible was placed near him, he reacted violently, snarling, speaking in guttural voices, even speaking Latin, a language which he had never learned. The family was terrified, and so they went to their Lutheran pastor, a man named Luther Miles Schultz, who quickly realized this was beyond his ability to handle, and he advised them to seek out help with the Catholic Church. That's when Father Edward Hughes, a Catholic priest in Washington, D.C., attempted the first exorcism, but it ended in disaster. Roland broke free from the restraints, ripped out a bed spring from the mattress, and slashed Father Hughes across the arm so severely that it required well over 100 stitches. Some reports say 150. Hughes had no choice but to abandon the process. For Roland's parents, the message was clear. This was beyond their ability and beyond the ability of one priest alone. They needed greater help. I cannot even begin to imagine what it would be like as a parent to see your child under attack by a supernatural force like this. Can you? During one session, the word Louis was on his body, and the family saw that as a sign. Since his mother had family in St. Louis and they were Catholic, this might be a good time to move there. Out of desperation, they packed up and moved there. It was in St. Louis that the Jesuit priests stepped in. The Archbishop of St. Louis granted rare permission for the rite of exorcism. Father William Bodern became the lead exorcist. Father Raymond Bishop, his colleague, carefully documented what unfolded. They were joined by assistants Father Walter Halloran and Father William Van Roo, plus priests and nuns and other witnesses over time. Over nearly 6 weeks, the priests battled night after night after night, 30 separate sessions. Over those 6 weeks, the Jesuit priests recorded incredible phenomena in their diaries. Things like the objects moving violently, crucifixes shaking, holy water being thrown back at them, chairs and furniture thrown without cause, words scratched into Roland's flesh like hell, evil, even the word exit, traced across his body as if by invisible claws. Superhuman strength. At times it took 3 or 4 grown men to restrain a boy barely in his teens. And he broke the nose of one of the priests. Bizarre manifestations like guttural voices, cursing the priests, blaspheming scripture, and mocking prayer. Nurses at the Alexian Brothers Hospital claimed they saw the mattress lift from the frame with Roland still on it. In another horrifying moment, Father Bowden noted that he had watched faint red lines resembling a pitchfork slowly trace down Roland's leg, leaving droplets of blood behind. Now, Bowden was only a foot away, and there were the usual 4 or 5 other witnesses in the room at the time. If you saw even one of those things, how would you explain it? And yet, even amidst all of this, Father Walter Halloran, one of the assistants, admitted decades later that he hesitated to label it definitively a possession. He said, "Some of it I'll never be able to explain." His honesty adds weight. Even a witness, reluctant to embrace the supernatural, confirmed that things happened he could not dismiss. So ask yourself, if this was just hysteria or just a troubled boy, how do you explain the doctors, nurses, and priests and all the things that were written in the record and correspond to each other? And what do skeptics say? Now, skeptics have argued that maybe the scratches were psychosomatic, brought on by stress, but even doctors admitted that they had never seen psychosomatic welts or scratches that spelled out intelligible words. And according to the priest's diary, some of these words were on his back as well, which seems an implausibly difficult thing to do to yourself. So that makes this all the more difficult to wave off. Now, other skeptics chalked up his superhuman strength to adolescent strength or hysteria, neither of which makes sense to me and aren't really a thing. Just exactly how does an adolescent that is small and unathletic suddenly become strong enough to break a grown man's nose, break out of restraint, break a spring out of a mattress, and overpower several grown men at once? And finally, on the issue of speaking Latin, skeptics suggest maybe he picked up a phrase or two from the trained priests, but obviously the priests would know the difference between a boy parroting sounds and someone demonstrating real fluency with the ability to answer back to their questions in a language they've never learned. Now, a certain amount of healthy skepticism is important, but dismissing everything that the witnesses saw out of hand just strains credibility. The evidence in this case seems hard to dismiss. This wasn't a case confined to a secret room and a handful of clergymen. The manifestations followed Rosen to different houses, 2 hospitals, even classrooms. By the end of it, nearly 50 people had witnessed all of this. Priests, doctors, nuns, neighbors, friends, all swore to what they had seen. 9 priests in total were involved at the different stages during the grueling process. 2 of the senior priests, Bodern and Bishop, kept the detailed diaries of the events. Those records became the backbone of Thomas B. Allen's 1993 book, Possessed, The True Story of an Exorcism, which remains the most fact-based account. Contrast that with William Peter Blady, who had stumbled across the case years earlier from a front-page Washington Post article. His novel, The Exorcist, transformed the story into a sensational tale filled with embellishments, spinning heads, levitations, and an invented demon. His version became the blockbuster 1973 movie. I'll drop some resources and references in the description section for you if you want to look deeper into this case. Keep in mind, though, these weren't superstitious peasants in the 1400s or something. These were trained clergy, including nuns and hospital nurses, with nothing to gain. This wasn't some secret rite hidden away in a dusty church record. The case actually made national headlines at the time. The Washington Post had a front-page story on it on August 20th, 1949, describing 20 to 30 exorcisms over nearly 2 months. Other papers across the country also ran it, but in smaller blurbs. But then, just as suddenly, it disappeared from the press. No follow-up stories, no exposés, the church never issued a public statement, and the family went silent. And outside the church, the case faded into memory. The Washington Post had briefly reported it, but after that, silence. So why the silence? If this is real, why let the story fade away? Because to the church, the sensational details weren't the point. They wanted to protect the boy and remind the faithful that Satan's work is usually quieter and more insidious. But if this is real, how did it finally end, and what does it tell us about evil today? Night after night, they had been praying and restrained Roland and endured violent manifestations. But on the evening of April 18, 1949, something changed. Roland convulsed violently. Witnesses described a struggle between voices that were not the boy. At one point, the priests invoked St. Michael the Archangel. According to Father Bishop's diary, the priests invoked the power of the saint. Witnesses described Roland suddenly convulsing, his voice no longer his own, deep, guttural, filled with rage. Then came a turning point. In that unnatural voice, Roland cried out, as if seeing the vision of St. Michael was present, commanding the demon to depart. The boy collapsed into stillness. Moments later, his eyes opened. He looked around the room and quietly said, "It's gone." From that night on, the disturbances ended. Think about that. Weeks of chaos, one final prayer, one decisive moment, and silence. No spinning heads, no Hollywood theater, just quiet triumph of faith over darkness. When it was over, Roland was calm. The violence, the welts, the guttural voices, all gone. The priests noted in their diaries that from that moment forward, not a single disturbance occurred. The church never made a public spectacle of it. Officially, they confirmed privately that they regarded it as a genuine possession. Following the St. Louis exorcism, the room in the Alexian Brothers Hospital was boarded up and sealed. The entire facility was torn down in 1978. The house where the family lived in Maryland is now an empty lot, and after it was abandoned in the 1960s. As for Roland himself, he grew up and went on to live a quiet life, and never spoke of the ordeal again. Many researchers now believe his real name was Roland Hunkeler, a man who worked as a NASA engineer. If that identification is correct, his innovations helped design heat-resistant panels for the Apollo missions. Imagine that. A boy at the center of one of history's most famous exorcisms may also have helped humanity reach the moon. Yet, his personal life wasn't simple. There are reports that he was estranged from his children later in life, though for reasons that are unknown. Were the demons still trying to attack him by causing his children to estrange him? It's been said that Satan hates the family and does whatever he can to destroy it. Right now in this country and around the world, there's an epidemic of estrangement from parents. It really makes me wonder. The truth is, we'll likely never know. He passed away quietly in 2020. The author of The Exorcist took his inspiration from this case, but he wrote a novel, not a documentary. He added layers of shock to grab attention, especially for the movie, with all kinds of special effects. But as I promised early on, here's how real life differed from the movie. The stuff that the movie got wrong. And real life is really strange. This is where the facts diverge from Hollywood sharply. They changed the main character from a boy to a girl named Reagan. They added spinning heads and levitation to the ceiling, even naming a demon as Pazuzu. And of course, the movie ends with a priest dying dramatically in one cinematic exorcism. The changes were the time frame. In the movie, it was the 1970s, and in real life, 1949. The location in the movie was Washington, D.C., but in real life, it was Maryland, D.C., and St. Louis. It was also in not just a bedroom as it was in the movie, but in the bedroom and 2 hospitals. The number of priests is different. In the movie, it was just 2, but in real life, it was as many as 9 over time. The number of witnesses in the movie was just 3, with no living witnesses because the girl couldn't remember any of the events, and the 2 other characters who witnessed it both died. In the movie, there was as many as 48 witnesses. In the movie, it was just 1 session, essentially, but in real life, it was 30 sessions and over a much longer period of time, over 6 weeks. The number of demons in the child in the movie was just 1 named Pazuzu, and because the letter X showed up on the boy's skin, the priest thought that there was as many as 10 demons within this child. In the movie, the choice of weapon was psychological, whereas in the movie, it was physical assault. In real life, the priest did not face 1 cinematic showdown. In fact, it was many. It was over 30 sessions. And they endured a grueling, drawn-out battle that lasted night after night after night. This case is chilling not because of Hollywood special effects, but because of the written diaries, the testimony of nurses, and the confirmation of priests. It stands as one of the best documented exorcisms in history. So yes, Hollywood exaggerated for spectacle, but the true story written in diaries, sworn to by many witnesses, is actually much stranger and difficult to deal with. And yet the church is careful not to overemphasize dramatic exorcisms because most of the devil's work is way more subtle. Temptation, bitterness, division, cruelty, and hate. Those are the daily weapons, the ones that pull us farther from God every day, and we don't notice until the damage is done. Those daily sins are the real battlefield. The Roland Doe case just makes that hidden war explosively more visible. And when evil goes loud, as it did in 1949, it's a reminder that God's power is stronger. Think of Psalm 23 that says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me." This case matters because when evil does break out in the open, like it did in 1949, it reminds us of the deeper truth that evil is real. Yes, it is real. But so is God's power. The diaries show what happened to Roland. The movie added things to embellish it, things that never happened. But the truth is frightening enough because it actually happened. And in the end, it wasn't the Hollywood special effects that won. It was prayer. It was persistence. It was God's strength. So why remember this story? Because it's not just about Roland. It's about all of us, about the daily battle that we're all in, even if we don't notice it. But it's also about the hope that we're never alone in our struggles. And this is just one case of exorcism. I will cover others. Next time I'll jump forward to the infamous Demon House story in Indiana. Unlike Roland's case, this one is backed by secular records from sworn police reports, social worker reports, staff affidavits, and child service testimonies. If you think possession is just old history or something people dream up, you'll want to see this because it's even harder to dismiss.